Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you. Today I want to talk about the ban list a little bit, but more specifically, I want to talk about a bit of a niche within the ban list of the three different formats, Master Duel, OCG, and TCG. Well, there's more formats than that, but those are the three I'm going to be focusing on. Not talking about Rush or Speed Duel, but more specifically, I want to talk about cards that are legal in Master Duel, but actually banned in both OCG and TCG in paper play altogether. I think that's a pretty interesting niche where we could possibly look at, are these cards too powerful for Master Duel? Do they need to go? While also looking at the angle of, are these cards actually fine for paper play as proven in Master Duel? Could they stay? We'll be discussing these today. Before we get into it, I just want to remind you real quick of the YouTube membership option if you are interested in supporting the channel in an additional way besides viewing. Thank you very much for viewing, by the way. But more particularly, if you join as a member, not only do you get your name at the end credits of the video, but you also get to see videos early as soon as I upload them. With Yummy about to come out in Master Duel in particular, I'm definitely about to start working on and getting out these combo guides, these gameplay videos, so if you want to see those in advance as soon as they are uploaded, which is days or sometimes up to a week before they go live for everybody else, then you'll definitely want to join as a member. I also super appreciate the support. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get right on into this discussion. Alright, so let's talk about some cards that were recently banned in both TCG and OCG that are still legal in Master Duel. I'm going to start with Splash Mage. Now, this is a card that I've already kind of discussed at length in recent videos, particularly in my latest tier list video. So, or also if you're on the Patreon, we talked about the OCG ban list over there. So, I don't want to, harp on too much, I guess, about Splash Mage, but I have a really kind of nuanced feeling about this card in Master Duel right now, particularly when it comes to Malice. See, Malice has kind of proven to be a deck where, the recent Red Ransom ban did not hit the deck in the way we all hoped / thought. Especially in my case, I thought the deck was going to be a lot weaker than it actually did end up being. And it's starting to kind of look like Splash Mage might be the only way to really effectively hit Malice in particular. But that's where this argument comes into play, right? Of, does a generic support card for a type like Splash Mage, should that get banned for the sins of one archetype? Because I'll stand on this hill that Malice is the only reason why Splash Mage would need to get hit. The next best cyber stacks are Mathmech and Ignister, which are like upper rogue at absolute best. There's no way they're even tiered decks in Master Duel right now, and I would assume paper play as well, especially with other hits being considered, right? And when you think about those decks which are already so weak, losing such a critical card, that just feels like really unfair. And I don't think that a deck like Mathmech needs to be hit. People will say that, Super Factorial is annoying, but in my experience, the Yu-Gi-Oh community, a lot of people have a hard time differentiating, I don't like this card, so it should be banned, and this card is too strong, so it should be banned. I think we might be at a point where Splash Mage, in Malice in particular, is actually too strong. You could make the argument of, as always, that this hinders future Cyberse archetypes, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with that with Splash Mage. I don't think that Splash Mage held Malice back necessarily. I think Malice was just insanely strong. I think it would be interesting to see a hypothetical format where Malice is at full power except for Splash Mage being banned, and seeing if Malice is still like a dominant deck. But yeah, I don't know. The Mathmech player in me, which I do really like Mathmech, I will not shy away from admitting that, is really, really sad at the idea of Splash Mage getting banned. A deck that is already, again, not even really able to be tiered in any shape or form, especially with all the powerful decks coming into Yu-Gi-Oh! That losing such a critical combo piece really, really hurts, and it's really not fair in that regard. At the same time, how else do we hit Malice at this point? Do we just start banning every Malice card? I don't necessarily think that's fair either. I've always been of the opinion that Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetypes should be kept as intact as possible, as playable as possible, in case somebody, really likes that deck. And you could make the argument that there's not really as much emotional attachment to a card like Splash Mage. So This card's really nuanced for me. I don't know. If it got banned, I would be a bit sad, but completely understanding. And if they hit Malice cards, like just started banning Malice cards en masse to keep Splash Mage, I would not feel the best about that either, honestly. So we'll have to just see what happens and what they end up doing. I imagine this card's going to get banned, but I think that's where we're at right now. Another recent ban in the OCG and TCG as well is Moon of the Closed Heaven. Of course, the reason you would want to ban Moon of the Closed Heaven is not because this card's effect in particular is too strong, but because it turns any 2 effect monsters into a Light Fiend, which then lets you go into Fiendsmith. So this is one where I mean, obviously I see it, right? Like, the ability to go into Fiendsmith with literally any deck might be a bit much, but I do think the word might is a bit appropriate there, because, you know, you think about all of these recent decks about to come out, like Yummy and K9. Of course, you could play Fiendsmith with these if Moon is legal. I don't know. It is a little bit of a free engine, right? I think the thing that you have to worry about the most is extra deck space when it comes to Fiendsmith. Like, that's the biggest commitment. But even then, that would be like, what, Moon, Sequence, Requiem, and then probably 2 other, like 5 total names. That's really not that much. Yeah, I think it's probably best if Moon goes, honestly. Now, granted, it's not like it will be inaccessible generically. There are still, of course, a couple of Xyz monsters. There's Excitonite is a rank 4, and there's the, is it the Gen Tempo? The drum one, I think, is a rank 3 generic Light Fiend as well, but it does make Fiendsmith more difficult to access. I think this would be fine though, especially with Master Duel having Engraver at 2. I think Engraver is at 1 in both OCG and TCG. I'm not 100% about that. But Engraver being at 2 with Moon being banned, excuse me, I think would be completely fine. So if they are going to hit Fiendsmith moving forward, I think Moon would be the way to do it. The big question is, does Fiendsmith need to be hit in this way? I don't know. Like, Fiendsmith isn't particularly dominant in the current meta, right? Dracotale doesn't really ever use it. I mean, it can, but it's not a, you know, one of the most used versions by far. Malice doesn't really ever use it. And then Ryzeal can use it, but really Onamat is hugely the way to go, with Mitsurugi pretty closely behind it. So, like, you have these decks that do have Fiendsmith as an option, but really aren't going for it even with Moon legal. Now, granted, you could make the argument that this hinders the design of future archetypes, and while generally speaking I'm not a fan of that argument, here I do kind of see it just because Moon is any 2 effect monsters. That is a huge umbrella to consider for every single archetype to be like, okay, but can this bridge into Fiendsmith, and if so, how easily? So I wouldn't be sad if Moon got banned. I think it would be fairly deserved. Alright, next up I'm going to talk about Knightmare Mermaid, which is weird. I actually thought this was legal in the OCG, but no, it is actually still banned over there. So unlike the last 2 Link monsters we talked about, I actually think this would be completely fine to come back in paper play. Now, granted, I don't personally play either TCG or OCG format, so my perspective is coming from the outside looking in, but given my experience with Master Duel and Orcust, like, Orcust is not only not too powerful right now, even with Knightmare Mermaid legal, but really in my time playing Orcust, which I've played it quite a bit, and also play against it, it's kind of rare that Knightmare Mermaid is even summoned. I mean, yeah, there are hands where, you know, if you open only Fiendsmith cards, you can bridge into Orcust. Same with Mitsurugi Orcust, but I don't think that has made the deck too powerful, and I don't think that the deck is particularly unfair. Especially if you're going to hit cards like Moon of the Closed Heaven that let you bridge Fiendsmith into Orcust, or Orcust into Fiendsmith, rather. That already is making Fiendsmith way weaker in Orcust, which in turn means that Knightmare Mermaid will come up even less often, right? So, in that regard, I think Knightmare Mermaid's probably fine to come back, especially looking at, you know, OCG and TCG and meta breakdowns. Orcust really is like, it seems like a rogue deck, maybe tier 3 you could argue, in those formats right now. And I think Knightmare Mermaid would be a nice little boost for the deck that ultimately probably wouldn't even raise its status from tier 3/rogue. So I think it would be fine, especially given a lot of the other hits that are in TCG and OCG. But I think this one is one that's going to be a bit divisive. So definitely let me know what you think in the comments below. But yeah, I don't think Orcus is too strong at all. I think they could have Knightmare Mermaid and be totally fine, personally. Speaking of archetype-specific cards, there's also Tearlaments Kitkallos. Now, this one does come with the caveat, of course, that in Master Duel, Tearlaments Merly is banned. And that's a lot of the reason why Kitkallos is legal. There's also Pearl the Rhino is banned, which I don't think is the case in Paper Play. So Tearlaments have had other hits which allow Kitkallos to be legal. I think this is a good choice, though. When you think about what Kitkallos does for Tearlaments, I mean, the entire archetype is basically based around it. And particularly if you look at Paper Play, it's been quite a while since Tearlaments has really done much of anything at all. And I think that having their identity would, make them a lot more playable. Now, I obviously don't think that Kitkallos, Merly, and Pearl the Rhino can coexist. I think that's way too powerful. This is one where I might have a bit of a bias, so take this with a grain of salt. I think that it would be totally fine for Paper Play to just kind of mirror Master Duel with Tearlaments hits. Given that, all of the Ishizu stuff is, banned, as particularly the Millers, right, in all the formats. Yeah, I think that having, Merly and Pearl the Rhino banned with Kitkallos legal makes for a better Tearlaments experience. Tearlaments in Master Duel, pretty much since the Merly and Pearl the Rhino bans, has kind of floated around between tiers 2 and 3, being a, fairly interesting and playable deck the whole time, even able to adapt new archetypes and cards like the Gem Knight support, right? Gem Knight Tearlament is currently the most popular way to play the deck, and this is a deck that is not possible in Paper Play. But you could debate that Gem Knight Tearlaments is tier 3 or maybe even a lower tier 2 deck that is, again, fun and interesting but not overpowered. And I think that good banlist design creates opportunities for strategies like this to exist. So, again, I'm Master Duel dedicated player, so I'm definitely going to be biased here. But I think that the way that Master Duel handled the Tearlaments hits, allowing Kitkallos to be legal and banning some of the other minor support cards, well, not minor, they are definitely major support cards, but by banning some of the, I guess, less important compared to Kitkallos cards, they've allowed Tearlaments to maintain its identity while still keeping its power in check. So I like that personally. I think that's what banlists should strive to do. And I think another example that we've seen of that in Master Duel is Spright Elf. Now, I'm gonna triple throw up the bias alert here because I love Spright. You all probably know I love Spright. It's my favorite archetype of all time. So here's the thing. I think that having Spright Elf legal while banning Totally Awesome is 1000% a better experience for both Spright players and people who are playing against Spright players. I think that Spright Elf, really the most egregious thing that it lets you do in Master Duel specifically is dodging Call By with Maxi. But, I mean, Call By is at 1 in Master Duel and, OCG. And, of course, banned in TCG, with the same being true for Maxi, except it's still at 2 here in Master Duel. Now, in a perfect... and obviously, here's the thing. This is Maxi's fault, right? Maxi is the big bad in this scenario. I think of all of those cards mentioned, Maxi, Call By, Spright Elf is by far the most innocent. And, of course, Spright is at literal full power, except for Totally Awesome in Master Duel right now. And it is a rogue deck at best. It is definitely not a tiered strategy. I think that keeping Spright Elf legal while banning Tearlaments Merly is another card you have to consider as well. That being level 2, that was often used in Tearlament. And that was often the case that was pointed at when people would argue that Spright Elf is too generic. But I think we can definitely see at this point that Spright Elf is in fact not too generic. It's seen some fringe play in other archetypes, like Yubel played it for like a minute. I think Monadium at one point played it for like a minute. I think maybe Snake Eye even played it for like a minute, but at no point was Spright Elf ever a part of these optimized strategies. Spright Elf has really only ever been good in Sprite pretty much since Merle got banned. So no, I don't think that Spright Elf is too generic of a card. I think it's perfectly fine. And I, again, think that it is a better experience to have Elf around and not Totally. And I think the reason I really harp on this is that OCG recently brought Totally Awesome back while Spright Elf is still banned, and I think that's personally the wrong move. Because Totally being legal doesn't just keep Spright Elf on the ban list, but it also forces other cards like Bahamut Shark and Ronin Tonin to be on, you know, watch out duty for being hit. Where Ronin without Totally doesn't do anything awful, like at all. Again, look at Master Duel. You know, and again, you can look at Master Duel for Bahamut Shark, and I think OCG still has Bahamut Shark legal as well, but like, without Totally, Bahamut Shark is just bringing out the Levice Dragon, which is a completely fair target. So, yeah, I really think that, and again, reminder that I have a bias, I think that Elf legal, Merle, and Totally Awesome banned is definitely the way to do it. I think that is made for the best experience for all players. Alright, let's circle back to something a little bit more generic. I want to talk about Predaplant Verte Anaconda. This is another pretty generic link to, of course, only 2 effect monsters. However, it does lock you out of special summoning for the rest of the turn if you use the effect. So if you're going to use this, it's often going to be at the end of your combo line. So right off the bat, you know, you compare this to ending on like an IP Masquerada, for example, right? Where IP Masquerada can go into SP, and that's really easy to do for a lot of decks. It's just 2 extra deck slots, and SP Little Knight is already a generically really good card to play. For Verte Anaconda, you have to commit the extra deck slot to a fusion monster, which can only be summoned through the Verte Anaconda. And of course, you need the main deck commitment of a fusion spell, as well as the material monster. So, when it comes to generic targets, you know, some of the scariest things that Verte Anaconda can bring out are Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, Shadal Winda is another one. I guess that's not generic, but I guess neither is Dragoons, because you always need the specific fusion materials, right? And of course, there's the branded fusion option as well. In Master Duel in particular, Verte Anaconda has not proven too problematic. Now, you could make the argument that Verte Anaconda is one of those cards that limits card design, particularly for fusion and polymerization spell cards. But I think there's 2 reasons why that's not necessarily the case. One is one I already touched on, the restriction that Verte Anaconda inherently has that you can't summon anymore this turn. So, like, you know, you even think about things like Red Eyes Fusion, which lets you go into this towers. It's also an Omni Negate. And that still hasn't really been enough to justify Verte Anaconda being banned. In fact, Verte Anaconda versus Dragoons was kind of an argument in early Master Duel that these cards couldn't coexist, but then Dragoon got unbanned and everything was fine. So here we are. The other reason why I kind of think that this isn't necessarily a strong argument is that it would also limit the design of any support cards for fusion and polymerization cards, right? Like, and we're already seeing those coming out with the new Predaplant support. There's a spell card that lets you send a Predaplant monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then, I think it's any Predap card, and then you can add any fusion or polymerization spell from your deck to your hand. So, like, if you're saying that Verte Anaconda limits the design of fusion spells, well, I would say that fusion spells inherently need to be kept in check because they already have support cards designed to, well, obviously support them. Even outside of the new Predaplant ones coming out, there are other cards, like the Keeper of Dragon Secrets, right? And among other stuff that mentions fusion or polymerization spell card. I don't think that, you know, limiting the power of those to keep them in check is a concept that is inherent only to the legality of Verte Anaconda. So I would kind of make the argument that Verte Anaconda could probably come back in paper play. I'm a little more hesitant though, because again, I'm not like a TCG or OCG player. This is one where you would kind of need, I think, to check it against the ban list as a whole to just know what's legal. And what all the options are before like really going for it. So that's just kind of my take though. I think at a glance though, looking at the formats, I don't think it would be that big of a deal, especially with, again, the fusion polymerization cards already having some pretty good support cards about to come out in the near future. Some honorary mentions. These are cards that are banned in TCG, limited in OCG, but are at more than one in Master Duel. Just 3 of them. I want to talk about these real fast. The first is Electrumite, which is currently at 1 at the time I'm recording this, but about to go to 3. This card is completely fine at 3. I don't think the difference between 1 or 3 is significant at all. And as far as, you know, Electrumite in TCG, I honestly think it would be completely fine, especially given that, you know, there's so many of the generic cards like Baron de Fleur, or, you know, especially Appaloosa now being banned. Like, Pendulum end boards are already a lot more limited in the scope of what they can do based on the fact that they don't have access to those generic cards, especially in TCG. So I think Electrumite would probably be fine to come back in TCG, and of course it's completely fine to be at 3 in OCG. I don't think the difference between 1 or 3 is significant really at all. Block Dragon is a really funny one. I totally didn't realize this was still at 1 in OCG. I did know it was still banned in TCG. This one, I feel like this has to be my biggest I told you so, which is a feeling I do like to revel in sometimes when it comes to ban list discussion, but I don't think Block Dragon ever needed to get banned. I think it was fine at 1 for a long time. It was legal at 1 in the OCG for the whole time. It never got banned. And I think it's totally fine to be at 3 now. I remember when Block Dragon was initially unbanned and, you know, people were all up in arms saying that Master Duel still had all the generic stuff legal, so Adamantipator was going to be able to do its thing. And I think what people failed to realize is that Adamantipator's thing is the most stoppable thing in the world when it comes to not only hand traps, but the fact that Adamantipator is a deck that rarely can pop off on one card. It's possible, but even without hand traps, it's inherently like luck-based, right? It's always going to come down to RNG. Relatively controlled RNG if you put enough rock monsters in your deck. But then if you do that, you don't really get to play hand traps. This was the thing that I encountered when I built, you know, Adamantipator after Block Dragon was freed. So, and the difference between 1 and 3 Block Dragon was really, honestly, insignificant. Like, obviously, opening Block Dragon is great. It's a fantastic extender for the deck, but it's not a one-card combo by itself. And, again, Adamantipator can rarely pop off with one card by itself, even ignoring hand traps. But when you factor in how likely your opponent is to be able to stop your initial Adamantipator like summon, your Excavate effect, then yeah, it's really easy to see why this archetype is not too, this card in general is not too strong. Gem Knights are able to come out with a bunch of really powerful support. They don't even use Block Dragon. Magnet Warriors dropped in the OCG. They're not really doing anything, and they also don't even really use Block Dragon at all. So I don't really think you can make the argument that Block Dragon has limited the scope of what rock monsters are, like, can do in their design. I think this card is totally fine. It was definitely way too powerful when it came out, but in 2026 Yu-Gi-Oh! Block Dragon is definitely at the point where it's been power crept. And finally, Red Reboot, which is at 1 in the OCG, banned in TCG, but at 2 in Master Duel. This is particularly relevant because it is a tech card in the current meta. I was almost going to say support. It is a tech card that has seen a lot of play in the current meta. It's quite good against Dracotail, which is a number of trap cards it relies on for its end board. Malice, which is a number of trap cards it relies on for its end board. As well as, of course, other decks like Labyrinth that it incidentally hits, as well as just other trap cards in other decks that it incidentally hits. I definitely think that Red Reboot should at the very least be at 1, if not banned. This is, I don't know, this is such a weird card. Mostly because there's not really any restriction on when you can use it from your hand, right? Unlike other cards like Imperm or Fuelos, or like Gamma, like particularly these really strong negate effects all kind of have a restriction that, well, aside from like Ash Blossom, that you don't have to, some kind of restriction in general, right? That you have to either have or not have certain amount of cards on the field. But this, you just drop half your life points and you can just do it, which is really not that big of an ask. Like, especially given how strong of an effect Red Reboot is. Yeah, I think this card needs to be at the very least at 1. I personally think it could be legal at 1 and probably be fine. It's just weird, right? Red Reboot is like, it doesn't come up that often, but when it does, it is insanely strong. So, I don't know. I definitely see the argument for banning it, especially because, like, because of how good it is against decks like Lab and Trap Tricks and Argo Stars and Odeon, right? All these trap card based decks, it is kind of unfair that they just get so destroyed by this card whenever it happens to be good in the meta. And I think that it's not really that great to punish off meta decks in the sake of also punishing. I don't know, it's weird. It's kind of case by case. It's hard to make a blanket statement about that. But all in all, I think that Red Reboot at 2 is a bit much. I think it at the very least needs to be 1, if not 0. Alright, that is going to do it for our ban list discussion. Thank you so very much for watching, especially all the way to the end. Super appreciate that. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments below about these cards, if they should stay, if they should go, and why. I would love to hear from you. But let's go ahead now and move on to our outro so we can thank those YouTube members and patrons for their very generous support. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.